"You have 10 minutes to pack your belongings and get out," the cocky CEO sneered, handing me a forged patent assignment. He wanted to steal my turbine die designs. What he didn't know was that firing me instantly revoked his manufacturing licenses, halting his production. 8 years ago, in 2018, Vance Precision Manufacturing was a mid-sized machining shop, struggling with high rejection rates on their turbine blade components. The aerospace industry demands tolerances of less than 5 microns, and any microscopic warping during the cooling phase of the casting process turns a $50,000 turbine die into scrap metal. Harold Vance, the founder and a brilliant machinist of the old school, knew his company was on the brink of bankruptcy. That was when he approached me. I had spent 15 years in metallurgical design, and I held U.S. patent number 10,843,261, which covered segmented coolant channel casting dies for high-velocity gas turbines. My design allowed for uniform heat dissipation, reducing cooling warp to near zero. Harold and I struck a deal. I joined the company as chief tool and die designer with a base salary of $160,000. But the crown jewel of our agreement was the licensing contract. I did not sell the patent to the company. Instead, I granted them a non-exclusive license to use my patented design on their CNC production lines, contingent on my active employment. In addition to my base salary, the contract specified a 1.5% royalty on all gross sales of turbine components manufactured using the patented dies. Under Harold's leadership, Vance Precision Manufacturing flourished. We secured a $12 million annual contract with GE Aviation, and my royalty payments averaged $180,000 a year. It was a fair partnership built on mutual respect. My daily routine was precise and methodical. I spent my mornings in the clean room, reviewing the toolpath files for our 3DMG Mori DMU 95 5-axis CNC machining centers. These massive, multi-million-dollar machines are the heart of the facility, carving intricate cooling channels into blocks of hardened nickel alloy. But a 5-axis machine is only as good as the instructions it receives. The G-code required to translate my 3D CAD designs into physical toolpaths was incredibly complex. To protect my intellectual property, I developed custom computer-aided manufacturing macros. These macros acted as a bridge, translating the raw design files into the exact coordinates the DMG Mori machines needed. I did not host these macros on the company's local network. Instead, I deployed the translation engine on a secure Amazon Web Services cloud server that I paid for out of my own pocket. Every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the CNC controllers at the plant were programmed to send an API request to my AWS server to refresh their digital rights management token. If the local server received a valid, cryptographically signed handshake, the machines would run the macros and execute the toolpaths. The verification process was seamless, but it required my hardware YubiKey to log into the AWS console to modify or override the access controls. To the machinists on the floor, the system just worked. To the corporate office, it was a black box they never bothered to understand. Then, 3 months ago, Harold Vance retired. His health was failing, and he handed the reins of the company over to his son, Bradley. Bradley had never swept a factory floor or calibrated a micrometer. He arrived with a freshly printed Ivy League degree, an expensive tailored suit, and a burning desire to flip the company for a quick profit. Within his first week, Bradley hired Victor Cross, a ruthless plant manager known for aggressive cost-cutting. Their goal was simple: boost the company's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, also known as EBITDA, to maximize the valuation for a pending acquisition. A global industrial giant called the Haddon Group was looking to buy Vance Precision for $45 million within 60 days. Bradley began auditing the payroll and operational expenses, and it did not take long for my name to appear on his spreadsheet. To an MBA who only saw numbers on a screen, paying a designer a base salary of $160,000 plus a $180,000 royalty seemed like an unnecessary drain on profits. He didn't care that my patent was the sole reason we had the GE Aviation contract. He didn't understand that the high-precision dies could not be manufactured without my custom CAM macros. He only saw a cost that could be eliminated to make the balance sheet look more attractive to the Haddon Group. I noticed the shift in attitude almost immediately. Victor Cross began to bypass my office, giving direct orders to the machinists to speed up the feed rates on the CNC machines to meet aggressive production targets. When I warned him that running the DMG Morai machines past their calibrated limits would ruin the nickel alloy blocks, he laughed and told me to stick to my drawings. Bradley stopped inviting me to the weekly production meetings, and my emails regarding quality control issues went unanswered. They were freezing me out, but I remained quiet, continuing my daily calibration checks and ensuring the AWS server was running smoothly. I knew my contract, and I knew the value of my patent. What Bradley and Victor didn't realize was that they were playing with fire, and I was the only one who held the key to the sprinkler system. The escalation began on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October. I was in the middle of reviewing the stress test simulation data for a new batch of turbine core dies when my desk phone rang. It was Bradley's executive assistant, asking me to come to the main boardroom on the third floor immediately. When I walked in, I found Bradley sitting at the head of the long glass table, flanked by Victor Cross and a young, slick-looking corporate attorney I had never seen before. The atmosphere was sterile and tense. Bradley didn't even look up from his tablet when I sat down. He simply gestured to the attorney, who slid a thick packet of documents across the table toward me. "Arthur, thank you for coming," the attorney began in a practiced, condescending tone. "My name is Logan Vance, and I represent the corporate interest of Vance Precision Manufacturing. As you know, the company is undergoing an operational restructuring to optimize efficiency ahead of the proposed transaction with the Haddon Group. As part of this restructuring, the position of chief tool and die designer is being phased out. We are transitioning our CAD and CAM design work to an external firm based in Mexico to reduce overhead." I pulled the documents toward me but did not open them. I looked directly at Bradley. "So you're firing me," I said, my voice flat. "We prefer the term mutually agreed separation due to restructuring, Arthur," Bradley said, finally looking up with a patronizing smile. "You've been here a long time, and my father appreciated your service. But the industry is changing, and we need to adapt. Of course, we want to make this transition as smooth as possible for you." "And what about my patent?" I asked, tapping the folder. "U.S. patent number 10,843,261. Under my contract with your father, the license for Vance Precision to manufacture, using my turbine die design, is contingent on my employment. If you terminate my position, the license is revoked. You will no longer have the legal right to produce the turbine blades for GE Aviation." Bradley chuckled, a sound that grated on my nerves. "Arthur, we've audited the files. We found the intellectual property assignment addendum you signed back in 2020. Under that addendum, you assigned all rights, titles, and interests in the turbine die patent to Vance Precision Manufacturing in exchange for a one-time bonus of $10,000. The patent belongs to the company now. The royalty payments we've been making to you were an administrative oversight on our part, which we are correcting starting today." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face entirely blank. I opened the folder to the page they had marked with a sticky note. There it was, an intellectual property assignment form dated November 14, 2020. At the bottom was my signature, but I knew instantly it was a fake. In November 2020, during the height of the pandemic, I was working remotely from my cabin in Montana, and I hadn't signed a single physical document for the company. The signature on the paper was a crude photocopy, pasted and scanned, likely taken from one of my monthly design approval sheets. They had forged my signature to steal my patent and clear the company's liabilities for the Haddon Group acquisition. "This signature is forged," I said, looking Logan Vance dead in the eye. "I have never seen this document, and I did not sign it. In November 2020, I was out of state, and all my signatures were handled electronically through verified DocuSign certificates. You can check your own system logs. This document is a fraud." Logan Vance didn't even blink. "Arthur, that is a serious accusation. The document is notarized and is part of the official corporate records of Vance Precision. If you wish to challenge its validity in court, you are welcome to hire a forensic document examiner. However, litigation is expensive, and Vance Precision has a robust legal defense fund. By the time a judge rules on this, the Haddon Group acquisition will have closed, and you will have spent your life savings on legal fees. Bradley leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Look, Arthur, let's be reasonable. We are willing to offer you a $50,000 severance package. In exchange, you just need to sign this waiver, releasing Vance Precision from any future claims, confirming that the 2020 assignment is valid and binding. If you sign it now, you leave with 50 grand. If you refuse, we will fire you for performance issues. Victor has documented several instances of your refusal to follow operational directives regarding CNC feed rates. You'll leave with nothing, and we'll fight you in court for the next 10 years. What's it going to be? I looked at the severance agreement. They wanted me to sign away a patent worth millions, a patent that was currently generating $12 million a year in revenue for them, for a measly $50,000. They thought they could bully a 52-year-old designer because they had corporate attorneys and deep pockets. They assumed I would panic at the prospect of losing my job and sign the paper to secure a quick payout. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I won't sign this, I said quietly, closing the folder and pushing it back across the table. Bradley's smile vanished, replaced by a cold sneer. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Victor, escort him out. Arthur, you have exactly 10 minutes to pack your personal belongings. Your security badge is already deactivated, and if you aren't off the property by then, security will escort you out. I stood up, adjusting my collar. I didn't say another word. I walked out of the boardroom, down the stairs, and into my office. Victor Cross followed me, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, watching my every move. I packed my desk calendar, my coffee mug, and a few personal hand tools into a cardboard box. Then, I reached behind my desktop computer tower. I unplugged my hardware security key, the YubiKey, from the USB port. It was the physical key that contained my cryptographic credentials for my personal AWS account. Victor watched me put it in my pocket, but he had no idea what it was. He thought it was just a regular thumb drive. I picked up my box, walked past Victor, and exited the facility. The cold autumn air hit my face, and for the first time in 3 months, I smiled. They thought they had won, but they had just signed their own death warrant. I drove straight to my suburban home, parked my car in the garage, and walked into my study. I placed the cardboard box on the floor and sat down at my desk. My first call was not to complain or vent, but to contact my cousin, Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a senior partner at Thorne & Associates, an intellectual property law firm in Cincinnati. He had spent 30 years defending patents in federal courts and knew the intricacies of manufacturing law better than anyone. I explained the situation to him, detailing the forged 2020 assignment addendum and my abrupt termination. They did what? Marcus asked, his voice sharp with professional disbelief. A physical signature on a paper document dated 2020, during the height of the lockdown, when you were out of the state. And they're claiming you assigned a multi-million-dollar patent for $10,000 without a digital certificate? That's exactly what they're claiming, I replied. They have a physical scan of a signed page. It's a clumsy copy-paste job from one of my design sign-off sheets, but Bradley is using it to convince the Haddon Group that the company owns the patent free and clear. He wants to boost his EBITDA by eliminating my 1.5% royalty before the sale closes in 60 days. Arthur, this is blatant fraud, Marcus said. Under federal law, specifically Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 261, patents have the attributes of personal property. Any assignment of patent rights must be in writing, and a forged assignment is completely void. More importantly, your original 2018 contract states that the non-exclusive license to use your patent is contingent on your active employment. Since they terminated you today, that license will legally expire in exactly 72 hours. Any manufacturing they do after that point using your designs is willful patent infringement under 35 U.S. Code Section 271. What's the plan of action? I asked. I'm going to draft a federal complaint for patent infringement and fraud, Marcus explained. We will file for an emergency temporary restraining order in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Ohio. I'll also draft a formal cease and desist letter. But we aren't just sending it to Bradley. We are going to carbon copy the corporate counsel for the Haddon Group and the procurement division at GE Aviation. Once Haddon realizes the entire turbine blade production line is built on a stolen patent and is about to be shut down by a federal judge, they will halt the acquisition. And once GE Aviation realizes their supply chain is compromised by a patent dispute, they will panic. I can assist on the technical side, I said. The CNC machines run on custom CAM macros hosted on my personal AWS server. Every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the local server Advanced Precision sends an API call to my server to refresh the license token. If the token is invalid, the macros won't execute, and the DMG Morai machines won't know how to cut the nickel alloy blocks. The machines will automatically enter a safe state lockout. Perfect, Marcus said. Keep the server online but revoke their access. We want them to hit a brick wall on Monday morning. I'll have the cease and desist letters delivered by courier first thing Monday. Let's see how Bradley Vance handles a production shutdown and a canceled acquisition at the same time. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and inserted my YubiKey into the USB port. The hardware key glowed with a faint green light. I logged into my AWS management console, passing the multi-factor authentication challenge. I navigated to the API Gateway dashboard. There, I could see the live logs for the Vance Precision endpoint. Every few seconds, the local server at the plant was pinging my API, checking the status of the license. The tokens were currently marked as active, but they were scheduled to expire on Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. I clicked on the access control list. With a few keystrokes, I deleted the authorization key assigned to Vance Precision Manufacturing's local IP address. To ensure they couldn't try to bypass the handshake by copying old cache files, I modified the macro logic on the server. If a machine attempted to run the G-code toolpath without a fresh, cryptographically signed token from my AWS server, the macro would output a command telling the DMG MORI controller that the license verification had failed, triggering an immediate emergency stop on the machine's spindle. I watched the screen as the system updated. It took less than 5 minutes. The digital kill switch was now active, and the countdown had begun. For the next 3 days, Vance Precision would continue running on the tokens they had downloaded the previous Monday. They would manufacture turbine blades through the weekend, thinking they had successfully stolen my life's work. Bradley Vance would probably spend his weekend celebrating the cost savings on his balance sheet, dreaming of the $45 million payout from the Haddon Group. But come Monday morning, the reality of the manufacturing world would catch up with him. You cannot run a high-precision aerospace facility on spreadsheets and forged documents. You need the code, you need the designs, and most importantly, you need the trust of the people who actually know how to build things. I closed my laptop, unplugged my YubiKey, and placed it on my desk. The stage was set, and the actors were in place. All that was left to do was wait for the clock to strike 9. On Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I sat in my kitchen, sipping a cup of black coffee and looking at my laptop screen. I had the AWS server logs open on one side of the monitor and a live terminal window pinging the VPN network gate on the other. At precisely 9:01, the logs flared with red warning lines. The local server Advanced Precision had attempted to ping the API gateway to refresh its license token. The request was denied. The server tried again, sending 5 rapid-fire API calls within 10 seconds. Each request returned a hard 403 forbidden error. At the factory, the 3 DMG AMOR-I DMU-95 machines were in the middle of carving turbine blade dies from nickel alloy blocks. When the license check failed, the G-code macro stopped translating the toolpath coordinates. The machine spindles immediately spun down, the coolant pumps shut off, and the controller screens flashed a bright red error message. System error, CAM macro, license unverfähig. Access operation halted. The machinists, confused, tried to reboot the controllers, but the machines refused to load the toolpath data. $10 million worth of advanced manufacturing equipment was frozen, and the entire shop floor came to a grinding halt. At 9:30, the physical couriers Marcus had hired arrived at their destinations. The first courier walked into the Vance Precision headquarters and hand-delivered the cease and desist letter and the draft federal complaint to Bradley's assistant. The second courier delivered the package to the Haddon Group's acquisition team in New York. The third courier delivered the files to the compliance director at GE Aviation in Cincinnati. The fallout was instantaneous. At 10:15, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the main office number for Vance Precision. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, Bradley sent a frantic email demanding that I call him immediately to resolve a technical glitch in the CNC network. I ignored it and took another sip of my coffee. At 11 o'clock, the phone rang again. This time it was Victor Cross's mobile number. I decided to answer. "Arthur, thank you for picking up," Victor said, his voice stripped of the arrogance he had displayed in the boardroom. "We have a major system outage on the shop floor. The DMG Mori machines are showing a license verification error, and we can't load any toolpaths. We need you to remote into the server and fix the glitch." The morning shift is standing around doing nothing. "It's not a glitch, Victor," I said calmly. "The license token for my patented turbine die designs has expired. Since I am no longer employed by Vance Precision, the non-exclusive license was legally revoked under the terms of the 2018 contract." "Arthur, put me on speaker," Bradley's voice suddenly barked over the line. He had been huddled next to Victor. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You signed a patent assignment in 2020. That patent belongs to the company. This technical lockout is a violation of your fiduciary duty, and our legal team is already preparing to sue you for millions in damages. Turn the machines back on right now." "Bradley, if you have a legal team, they should be reading the federal complaint that was delivered to your office an hour ago," I replied, my voice steady. "The 2020 assignment document is a crude forgery. We have already filed for a temporary restraining order in federal court. Furthermore, I have no fiduciary duty to a company that terminated my employment last Thursday. The AWS server and the CAM macros are my personal property. If you want to use them, you need a license, and currently, you don't have one. Listen to me." "You old fool," Bradley screamed. "We are in the middle of a $45 million acquisition. You are ruining this company." "No, Bradley, you ruined it when you decided to forge my signature to save a few pennies," I said. "And by the way, how is the Haddon Group reacting to the news?" Silence fell over the line. I knew exactly what was happening. The Haddon Group's legal team had likely already contacted Bradley's office, demanding an explanation for the patent infringement claim. In manufacturing acquisitions, intellectual property disputes are a massive red flag. If the buyer cannot guarantee they own the rights to the core technology of the company they are purchasing, the deal is dead. Before Bradley could respond, I heard a beep on his end. It was the sound of another incoming call on his desk phone. "Arthur, hang on," Bradley muttered, his tone suddenly shifting from rage to sheer panic. "I have the Haddon Group on the other line. Just don't hang up." "I'm not hanging on." "Bradley," I said, "if you want to talk, have your lawyer call Marcus Thorne. Any future communications will go through him. Have a productive Monday." I hung up the phone. A few minutes later, Marcus texted me. The compliance director at GE Aviation had just sent a formal notice to Vance Precision, stating that they were suspending all orders for turbine components until the patent ownership dispute was resolved. Under their supplier agreement, GE could not accept parts that were subject to potential patent litigation. With their biggest client suspending orders and their $45 million buyout on the verge of collapse, Bradley Vance and Victor Cross were trapped in a vice of their own making. They had thought they could treat a veteran designer like an obstacle to be cleared, but they had forgotten that a factory is not made of spreadsheets. It is made of engineering, and they had just locked out the engineer. By Tuesday afternoon, the walls were closing in on Bradley Vance. The Haddon Group's board of directors had sent a formal letter stating that they would withdraw their $45 million acquisition offer unless the intellectual property dispute with Arthur Pendleton was settled with prejudice within 48 hours. They were not willing to inherit a federal lawsuit and a compromised supply chain. At the same time, GE Aviation's legal team demanded proof of patent authorization under threat of terminating their $12 million annual contract. The forgery of the 2020 document was completely indefensible. Marx's team had already uncovered that the notary stamp on the document belonged to a local notary public, who had actually retired in 2019, making the forgery not just a civil liability, but a potential criminal offense. That evening, I received a phone call from a number I hadn't seen in months. It was Harold Vance, the retired founder of the company. His voice was frail, but he sounded incredibly tired. "Arthur," Harold said, pausing for a long moment. "I heard what happened. I am so sorry. I built that company with my own two hands, and I trusted Bradley to run it with honor. I never imagined he would do something so incredibly foolish and illegal. He lied to me, Arthur. He told me you wanted to retire and had signed the patent over. I was a fool to believe him." "I know, Harold," I said quietly. "I never had any issue with you. You always treated me fairly. But Bradley and Victor Cross tried to steal my life's work and throw me out on the street with nothing." "I know, and they are going to pay for it," Harold said, his voice tightening. "I still hold 51% of the voting shares in the parent company, Arthur. I am stepping back in. I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I want to settle this, but I need to know what it will take to make things right and get those machines running again. Every day the factory is silent. We lose $50,000 in penalties." I had already discussed the terms with Marcus. We had the agreement drafted and ready. "Here are my terms, Harold," I said. "First, Bradley Vance and Victor Cross must be removed from the company immediately. Bradley must resign as CEO and surrender his seat on the board. Victor Cross must be fired for cause, with no severance. Second, Vance Precision will sign a formal declaration admitting that the 2020 patent assignment document was null, void, and fabricated. Third, the new licensing agreement for U.S. patent number 10,843,261 will double the royalty rate from 1.5% to 3% on all gross sales of turbine components. Fourth, Vance Precision will pay a retroactive licensing penalty of $500,000 plus a $300,000 lump sum consulting retainer to cover my legal fees and compensate me for the termination." Harold gasped slightly at the figures, but he knew he had no choice. Without my patent and my G-code macros, the company was worth nothing, and the Haddon Group buyout would dissolve. "If you agree to these terms, Harold," I continued, "I will sign a new licensing contract, and I will reactivate the AWS license keys. The DMG Morai machines can be running by tomorrow afternoon." "I'll have the board approve it first thing in the morning, Arthur," Harold said. "Thank you for not destroying the company entirely." "I only defend what is mine, Harold," I replied. The next morning, the board meeting was short and decisive. Bradley Vance was forced to resign in disgrace. His corporate career ruined before it even started. His father stripped him of his executive power, and he was banned from entering the facility. Victor Cross was escorted from the building by the same security guards he had used to threaten me just a week prior. By noon, the settlement documents were signed. My bank account received a wire transfer of $800,000. $500,000 for the retroactive license and $300,000 for the consulting retainer. The new contract was executed, securing a 3% royalty on all future turbine blade sales, which would guarantee me at least $360,000 a year in passive income. Regardless of who owned the factory, I sat at my desk, plugged my YubiKey into my laptop, and logged back into the AWS management console. I navigated to the API gateway and recreated the authorization key for Vance Precision Manufacturing's local server. Within seconds, the logs began to scroll with green lines as the plant's network successfully completed the cryptographic handshake. A few miles away, on the factory floor, the red error screens on the DMG Morai DMU-95 machines disappeared. The spindles began to hum, the coolant pumps roared back to life, and the machines resumed carving nickel alloy blocks with micro-precision. The assembly line was moving again. A month later, the Haddon Group completed their acquisition of Vance Precision Manufacturing for $45 million. Harold Vance retired for a second time, his company's legacy preserved. The new corporate owners immediately sent me a formal letter welcoming me as an external technology consultant and confirming their commitment to the new royalty agreement. I stood on the deck of my cabin in Montana, looking out at the mountains, holding a fresh cup of coffee. Bradley Vance had wanted to make a name for himself by cutting costs and stealing patents. Instead, he had lost his job, his reputation, and his father's trust. I had my patent, my code, and a secure financial future. In the world of high-precision engineering, you can never replace the person who writes the instructions. They had tried to lock me out of my own design, but in the end, they were the ones who were left standing in the cold,